Hi, I'm Chris from SQL for Automation. Today we're going to upgrade the application we've created in the last tutorial. Now, if you haven't seen it, we've basically programmed a PLC to measure the temperature and humidity every 5 seconds and then store it in a database. So this application has now been running for a while and we want to take its data and visualize it using the free software Grafana. And to do it, we're going to download and install Grafana, connect it to the database, and set up the dashboard step by step. So that by the end of this video, we will have this dashboard. Now, this dashboard is just an example to show you a few of the elements you can use in Grafana. I guess you normally wouldn't display the same information several times. Anyway, the different elements we're going to set up are the date, a clock, a text field, an image from the internet, this graph which combines two entities, a single state field, this bar graph, a small graph with a fixed time range, fields with aggregated functions, and then finally this power gauge. So yeah, let's start. So first we're going to have to download it. To do it, I'm going to open my browser, go to grafana.com, click this download button and the button here, choose my operating system, and then download the installer. Now as soon as I have it, I can open it, execute it, and run it anyway, and then just go through all the steps. Alright, so the server should now be running on the port 3000. So to open it, we can go to our browser, type in localhost with the port 3000, which brings us here, and then in here we just enter admin with the password admin, after which it will ask us to set a new password, so we do that. Click save, and we're online. Okay, so now we can set up our data source. Just click on this button here, select your data source type, and then fill out these settings here. So first I'm going to enter a name, type in the address with the port, the database I want to use, the user and its password, and that's it. So now we can go down here, click save and test, and we should have our data source. So now we can create our first dashboard, and I'm going to do this in two parts. First, I'm going to add all the elements I want to use, and then only later change their design. So it's going to look horrible in the beginning, but don't worry about that. To start, I can click here, which will bring up a new dashboard, and because it already has an empty panel inside, we can directly add a new query. Now, as you can see, it's already created an example for us, and we can use this as a template. Now, what we have here is one of the two ways we can set up the query, and we're going to stick with this for now. But later, we're also going to use the other one. First, if you have multiple data sources set up, you should make sure that you're accessing the correct one. And then you can define which table you want to query, what column to use as the timestamp, the metric you want to display on your panel, the value you're interested in, and then finally, if you want to filter or group it. So to make this a bit easier, let's maybe take a look at our database. First of all, we have to define what table we want to use. Now, as you can see here, Grafana already selected the states table, and that's correct, so we don't have to change that. Next, it needs to know which column it can use for the timestamp, and again, it already selected the correct one, so we can leave that as well. Which brings us to the metric column. Now, with the metric column, we can basically show what exactly we're displaying in the graph. And right now it's set to none, which means it's just displaying the name of the column it's using for the values. But that's not really what I want. In my case, I want to display the temperature and the humidity, and we can find that information in this column. So I'm going to select the entity as my metric. So now we just have to define what column we want to use for the values, and we're obviously interested in the states. So I'm going to select the state as my value column. So now I just need to filter the results so I can show each of my entities as a separate line. And to do this, I'm just going to make a filter to only select the rows where the entity is the humidity. And then I'm going to duplicate this query so I can also display my temperature. Alright, so now since I don't want to display every little detail, I'm going to aggregate my value and only display an average. And then I'm going to give that average an alias. And finally average it for every 15 minutes. Okay. So now with these settings here, you can play around a bit if you want. But again, I'm not going to do that too much for now. But what we want to do is I want to display the temperature on a different y-axis. So I can click this. And then I can enter the ranges of each axis. And enter the units. Okay. So now we can also add a time region. For example, the working hours. And then I'm going to remove the panel title and make it transparent. That's it. So that's our first panel. And I'm actually going to change it just a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better. Okay. Next, we're going to add this single stat here. Just click Add Panel, choose Visualization, Single Stat, and then we enter pretty much the same things like before. Enter a prefix, select the unit, and display 1 decimal. Alright. Next will be our bar gauge. So again, add panel, choose visualization, bar gauge, and enter the query. And the rest we're going to pretty much leave for now. Just going to remove the panel title and make it transparent. Next, we're going to make this single graph here. And for this graph, I'm going to enter a relative time, so it's always going to display the last 24 hours, no matter what time frame I'm selecting. And then I'm going to remove all the info. Remove the panel title and make it transparent. Alright. So next will be our aggregated functions. But instead of adding them one by one, I'm going to select our single stat, duplicate it, and modify it. Okay, so now let's add the power gauge. And now we're going to add the title. We can either choose between Markdown and HTML. I'm going to go with HTML. And then I just enter a paragraph with the text and change the font size, the font weight, and the color. Alright, so now with the same element we can also display an image from the internet. Just gonna duplicate it, and instead of the paragraph I'm gonna insert the image with the URL, and this URL is just pointing to an image on our website. And that's it. So I'm just gonna paste that link into my image. I have it here, and then I can also change the style if I want. Okay, so now we're gonna add our date, and this will be a bit different than the other elements. I want to extract the date from my table by always looking at the timestamp from our last entry. So first of all, instead of using the query builder, I'm gonna edit the query directly, format it as a table, and then order the table by the timestamp descending and limit the result to one row. And this should give us this timestamp here. Now, it's not really what we're looking for yet, so we'll have to extract our date from this timestamp and format it so it looks good. Now, I'm not going to explain the functions I'll be using in detail, but you should be able to pretty much just copy the syntax if you want to do the same thing. So first I'm going to display the day as a word. And then I'm also going to add the day as a number, the month as a number, and the year. And that's it. So let me just remove the panel title, make it transparent, and we have our date. So this leaves us with the clock, and that one's actually a bit more complicated than the other ones. Because we want it to count up automatically, we're gonna have to use a plugin we don't have yet. Luckily though, it's pretty easy to download and install a new one. You can search for Grafana plugins, and then look out for the clock plugin, which you have here. And there we go to installation and download the zip file. And then we can extract it, move it to our installation folder, and then we can restart the server. It's just very important that we save our dashboard first, because otherwise we would lose everything. Okay, so now we can go to Services, search for our Grafana service, and restart it. Alright, so now we can go to our browser, refresh it, add panel, visualization, and we should find our clock plugin. And there I'm just going to remove the panel title and make it transparent, and that's it. So now we have a basic dashboard, and the only thing left to do is to make it look a bit better, and then duplicate the stuff down here to also show the humidity. So let's do that. Now the first thing I recommend is that you decide on a color theme. Now I'm going to use the yellow and blue from SQL for automation and black and white, because most of the time it looks better if you don't use 20,000 different colors. So I'm just going to change these colors and a few settings and repeat this process for every panel. Also, I'm not going to narrate everything, because it's basically the same process over and over again. But I'm going to show it so you can follow along if you want to. Okay, I think we can leave it like this. You could obviously customize and upgrade this a lot more, but for this video I think it's good enough. Now, what you might have noticed during the editing is that it sometimes took quite a long time to load the panels, and that's because our database type isn't really optimized for the amount of data we put inside. So depending on your application, it can make sense to use a time series database like InfluxDB or Prometheus instead of a relational one like I'm using here. And maybe we'll cover that in a future video. So if you're interested in that or have any questions, feel free to write a comment below or visit our channel or website for more information. Thanks a lot for watching, I hope this video was helpful and I'll see you in the next tutorial.